Hello, 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 and welcome to today's episode of Her Version. This podcast is dedicated to sharing stories of struggle to triumph, a platform that allows individuals to tell their truth in order to inspire and uplift others. For those of you that are new to this podcast and like content like this, make sure you hit that subscribe button. Make sure you follow, like, and share. I am your host, Sabrina Victoria. Let's jump right in. Hello, and thank you for joining us today for this episode of Her Version. The Her Version platform is built on storytelling and the understanding that many times our greatest learning experiences come from listening to other people's stories. Today, I have an amazing speaker with us. Her name is Melissa Fairchild. Melissa was born with a moderately severe hearing disorder at a young age, but did not get her first pair of hearing aids until she was 18. On top of that, her younger years were filled with trauma from molestation, suicide attempts, and a very dysfunctional family. Melissa is here today to talk about the inspirational work she has done to overcome her past experiences and work on her own personal power. She's going to be talking about healing from trauma, her relationship with God, and the priorities that have guided her to the happiness she now has. Welcome, Melissa.
Hi, Sabrina. So nice to be here.
Oh, it's so nice to be here. I so appreciate you and the patience that you had with us getting on this podcast. I know you are a very busy woman, so I appreciate you taking some time out of your day to hang out with us and talk about all the awesome things that you have going on in your life now and the journey that you've been through.
Well, I'm excited to be here and I hope my story does help someone. So,
yes, awesome. So how has your week been?
Busy. A lot going on this week. It really is a week of many things happening. So it's kind of exciting, kind of scary at the same time.
I love that. Is that like a lot of things happening because it's the new year and you're like pushing, or is it just like this week's just been crazy?
A lot of good things happening. I'm involved in a summit this Friday. I've got this podcast. I've had some networking events that have been real productive. So it's just jumping right in this year.
I love that. Well, that is awesome. And it's a great way to start the year versus the opposite of just twiddling your thumbs. So,
Amen.
So I would take that over the twiddling of the thumbs. Well, listen, we have a lot to cover, in the little bit of time that we have here to speak. I would love to just kind of jump right in and kind of give the floor to you and kind of hear a little bit about your childhood, your teenage years, and kind of what was the start? What was the process that kind of started you and molded you through the journey that you've been on? Do you mind opening up about that?
I don't mind at all. But let me clarify. You want me to start kind of where it started changing? That's kind of interesting. Maybe where things started changing was when I was 13. By 13, I had already been, my mother had been divorced 4 times, and I had been sexually assaulted as a 5-year-old and nearly sexually assaulted again as a 12-year-old by my grandfather. Lots of molestation in between there. I was known to be a very responsible child, so I took on responsibility a lot. By the age of 13, I was running the household. So I cooked, I cleaned, I took care of my younger siblings, which were ages 10, 8, 6, and 1. And when I wasn't taking care of all of that, and my mother was home, I was her hairstylist, her masseuse, her psychotherapist, just kind of filled in all the areas. So by 13, I was really overwhelmed by a lot of things. And that that spring, I made my first suicide attempt. So
Oh my.
yeah, I took back then. You could buy the large bottles of aspirin, and so my mom had a full one in the medicine cabinet, and I took that whole bottle before I went to school. It's probably a very good thing that I went to school because after lunch, it just all kind of came up.
Wow.
Nobody knew what had happened. I didn't tell anybody what I did. And
Yeah.
interestingly, I don't know that my mother ever noticed that the bottle was even missing. And
Wow.
so I made that. That was my first attempt. And that was my only really serious attempt because the next time, which was later in the spring, right before school was out, and there wasn't anything in the medicine cabinet left to do anything with. But
Yeah.
for whatever reason, one evening I went looking through and I took anything I could find and then laid down next to the baby to go to sleep with no intention of waking up.
Wow. Do
So
you remember vividly what that was, or have you kind of blocked that out? Do you remember that? How you felt or what you were running from or the fear?
well, that's the interesting thing because the next piece of this is that my mom comes in there and she wakes me up and I'm mad. I'm really angry because in my 13-year-old mind, I thought my mother didn't have any clue as to why it is I had just attempted suicide. But there was no reason for her to even know or recognize that. But as a 13-year-old, I didn't see that. And
Yeah.
so in that moment of being angry, because I realized also in that moment that I had made the attempt in order to hurt my mother, and um, and it didn't hurt her. You know? So in that moment, I made there was no reason to ever have to be suicide again, and I never have attempted since. Never thought about it. I've had feelings occasionally, like it'd be really nice not to wake up. I kind of had enough of this, but
Yeah.
I've never made an attempt since then.
Wow.
So
So,
it,
do you think she didn't care because she didn't know? Like, she didn't realize that's what you were doing? Like, did
oh,
she just think you were taking a nap?
as an adult, my mother had no idea what had just happened. I understand
Wow.
that now. I just didn't understand that then,
Got
which
it.
was probably a blessing because it eliminated me ever attempting suicide again. There was no reason to do it in my mind
Yes.
because I was, I'm playing the role my mother should be playing,
Yeah.
and it's not happening. And I'm not being allowed to have friends, and I'm not being allowed to do any of the things that kids do. I'm in honors classes. I'm overwhelmed. I'm tired. And I was always kind of experienced as an extension of my mother, if that makes any sense, but
Mhm.
not really an individual myself. So I was always there to back her up from the start. So yeah, it wasn't a great situation, and and I'm glad it wasn't successful. But
Yeah.
at the time, it it felt like the way out. You know.
Definitely, definitely. So as you grew up, and you've had these serious adult-like issues, popping up at such a young age, how
Mhm.
old were you when you finally started to kind of mentally and emotionally become aware that you had to rise above? Did that come at a younger age or an older age?
Actually, that year, that same summer, I had an experience. It's not one I'm proud of at all, but it definitely had a positive impact on me. So I'm overwhelmed. Summer is here. I'm in charge of my four younger siblings,
Wow.
and all I want is an hour to myself when the baby's taking a nap after lunch.
Okay.
The three older siblings were not, they didn't want to take, directions from the oldest sister. And so I'd send them upstairs and they'd come down and they'd, fighting me. They want to get up, they want to get out. And I'm like, oh, come on, 1 hour. And so unfortunately, I resorted to slapping them on the legs.
Okay.
Well, that doesn't take long before that escalates. And the slap started leaving bruises. And that was my saving grace, actually, because when my aunt saw the bruises, she asked my sister, what happened? And my sister told her, and my aunt confronted me about that.
Okay.
And that was huge for me because I knew it was wrong and I needed to stop. And it forced me to have to take responsibility and to take responsibility and to find a different way.
Yeah.
The crazy situation is that having 5 kids in a house or in an apartment all day long is not natural. It's not normal. And so the whole situation was unnatural to start with. And so I just made the decision that the only way for me to be able to handle this better is that I talked to my siblings and I said, okay, guys, here's what we're going to do. You can go outside during the day, but you have to you have to come in and check in every hour so I know you're okay. And you have to be within eye shot so that you can see me and you can hear me if I have to call you home really fast.
Got it. Yeah.
And that got me through until I left at 17. So that really made a huge difference. Yes, that meant lying to my mom. Not a great exchange, but it was such an unnatural situation and I didn't have a lot of choices. So I had to do what I had to do.
100%.
And I did, when my aunt confronted me, I had made a commitment to myself right then and there that I'd never hit a child again. And honestly, I've only had 2 occasions where I popped a child once and it hurt me way more than it hurt them because every other avenue had been exhausted and never had to, pop them again after that. They just needed something to jar them a little bit.
Definitely, definitely. So in your opinion, what were the 2 biggest kind of changes that you made early on? Maybe not without even knowing that you were like working on personal development. But besides, obviously the one where your aunt confronting you, what are 2 things that maybe you kind of did on your own that you kind of recall?
Well, it was interesting. When I was 15, I don't remember the situation, but it was one of those times when my mother was in a rage and I was the focus of it. And for something snapped and I was usually the one that was always trying to calm everything down, quiet down, figure out how to get around it, keep everything, peaceful.
Yeah.
And in that moment, I became like my sister, and I'm like, I'm not taking this shit. It just something. And I don't really know what was going to happen, but all I know is all of a sudden my mother saw a shift in me and she's walking backwards and I'm walking towards her. And like I said, I don't know what's going to happen, but I have this voice in my head that says, okay, Melissa, you can beat the hell out of your mom, but is that really what you want?
Yeah.
It stopped. I mean, just right there, I stopped in my track.
Wow.
Nothing bad happened.
Yeah.
My mom eventually, immediately responded back to take control of stuff, but she had no idea that she'd lost control of me long before.
Yeah.
And this time when she did that, she liked to push you until I would start crying. And I was like, you don't get another tear out of me. We're done. We're not having any more tears. You don't get that anymore.
Yeah.
So that was kind of the first time I stood up for myself, I guess you'd say.
Yes.
And yeah, it was interesting, but it definitely shifted some things. The next time I would say was when I was before I turned 17. So I'm in my junior year of high school, and my birthday's in the fall. So before my birthday came up, I'm really overwhelmed. My grades are declining. I'm getting 4 hours of sleep a night.
Wow.
Yeah, crazy. And so it's really got too much. And my high school counselor called me in again and asked, "What's up?" Because I was a straight A student, and in the ninth grade. And now I'm a junior, and my grades are steadily declining, and there's no overt reason as to why that should be happened. Even though, this whole time I have no hearing aids and I'm learning to cope the best I can to do the schoolwork and that. But when you're doing everything that I'm doing and then you're getting 4 hours of sleep, maybe you're just exhausted, physically,
Yeah.
emotionally, spiritually exhausted. And so I took a chance, which was huge because I had taken a chance with Child Protective Services previously, and they totally failed us. They didn't do anything for us. They saw this immaculate home, and I'm like, well, I did it,
Yes.
So I took the chance one more time with my high school counselor, and that was my saving grace. Um, when I told her, she took me seriously, which was so completely different from anything I'd experienced.
Yes.
She went straight to bat for me.
Wow.
So she found out I could leave home at 17 so long as I had another adult to take responsibility for me. And as long as I had that, my mother couldn't make me come home, which would, if I had left and had to come back home, it would have made everything so much more worse. Um, so that was when, and it was a really, really tough decision to make because I knew how it would affect everything.
Yeah.
And ultimately, though, I had to choose me. And that was the first time I had chosen me. And I left home and began my healing process, which has been ongoing.
Yeah, definitely. Wow, that's so interesting. Have you ever reached back out to that woman, like as the years went on?
Just thinking the other day, I'm like, I've reached out to so many people and I never reached out to her. I mean, it was just, I'm really disappointed because, especially since she doesn't even know, I don't think she knows that I graduated high school because I completed my junior year and then I transferred to live with another person and completed high school that way. So she has no idea, and I'm really disappointed in myself for that. Because it really did. It made a huge difference. I mean, even after I had left home, there was one day that my mother came up to the school, which just you have to understand that I never felt safe or loved growing up. I never felt safe and I never felt loved. And so when my mother showed up at the school one day, I was terrified. And she immediately pulled me into a room and shut the door. My counselor was outside of the door. She couldn't get in. She was terrified.
Oh my gosh.
I mean, she genuinely cared. And she genuinely probably saved my life because I don't, that first weekend, my birthday that year was 2 days before Thanksgiving. And so I left the day after I turned 17. And she, so I had this long weekend to actually sleep. And when I came back to school on Monday, a friend of mine said, "What happened to you? You look so different." I'm like, "Well, that's what sleep does for you."
Are you serious?
It was that dramatically
Wow.
different because I was exhausted. I mean,
Yeah.
I had no idea just how exhausted I was at that time.
Wow. Look at that. Incredible. And an incredible attests to like how important like the stress level to be able to sleep is,
Mhm.
you know?
Mhm.
Wow. Unbelievable.